Okay, hello everyone, welcome back to Intro to iOS Development. Today we're going to be going through another pretty useful UI element called UICollectionViews. First, some logistics. Once again, do not email us regarding extensions. We've said this a couple of times now and we've still been getting emails. We will not respond to emails starting from now forward. Just post a private post on Piazza. It's pinned on the top. Just read all of those. And then we're gonna have the hack challenge opening ceremony, I think the second week after break. So start thinking about hack challenge ideas. I'll put up a write-up of what we basically expect out of you from this hack challenge later this week. Does anyone have any questions about that? Okay, cool. So a lot of people submitted really amazing project 3s. Unfortunately, I could only pick a handful just for time constraints, but we're gonna go through these 4 students' submissions. So the first person is Anthony. Are you here, Anthony? No. All right. Anthony. Sad. So here we have 4 arenas. So red square, blue circle, magic, and triangle. Red square is pretty simple or standard, but if you drag, you can do fun stuff like this. You can increase the size, and then you can change to eraser mode, and you can erase. You can hide and show, and then you can change the title, and then save it like that. And then if you go back, it'll actually save. So if you want to clear it, you can click reset, and then it'll be reset, and it'll go back and it's normal. So really awesome job. These are all pretty similar. I really like the color aesthetic. Very 90s or early 2000s, which I appreciate. So yeah, awesome job. And then there's also the triangles, which does something pretty similar. And you can change the size, edit the name, etc. So there's that one. And then Sydney, is Sydney here? No. Where is everyone today? Okay, so pretty similar. So you got your red squares. You can set the title. We can change the size, so we can have bigger squares. We can save it. Go back. Same thing with circles. And then the magic one has got the really nice random colors going. So awesome job there. Next is Evan. Is Evan here? All right. Once again, kind of similar layout, but you can actually specify the size, and it'll give you a range from 5 to 300. So we can start with pretty small ones, and then these are the thick rectangle squares. You can hide and show. Oh crap. So if I save this and exit, it'll go back. Similar, you can get these tiny rectangles, big boys, and then the medium ones. And then you can save and exit. So awesome job. Last one is Jeremy. Is Jeremy here? Are none of these people here today? Okay. They're not getting featured next time if they don't come. So this one is pretty cool because you can actually adjust both the height and the width. So you can get wide and skinny rectangles. Wow. Very cool. You can use the eraser, and then you can show and hide the subviews. And then in these ones, you can change the title, and it's got this cool blur popover. You can dismiss, and it'll save like that. So yeah, awesome job, everyone. So the grades are now posted on CMS, and if you have any questions, let us know. Okay, unfortunately, Polo is down right now due to some ongoing maintenance, so we'll do these without Polo. Here's the first question. So what are table views made up of? Sections that contain buttons, rows or cells that contain labels and buttons, sections that contain rows or cells, and sections that contain labels and buttons. Does anyone want to shout out the answer? C. That's correct. So basically, table views, you can have table view cells that inside have labels and buttons, but each cell is a row in your table view. All right, next question. Which table view method is optional to implement? And then you can just shout it out. Wait, what'd you say? B? Yeah. B is optional. This is because this is part of UITableView delegate, not UITableView data source. And so when you create a table view, you must implement the data source in order to actually display data inside your table view. But you don't have to like have something happen when you like select a row, for example. Does anyone have any questions about that? All right, cool. So now let's talk about UI collection views. So what are collection views? It's basically a way of displaying a grid of items, and it's very, very similar to UI table view with like some minor changes. So here's some examples of UI collection view. So this one is like the Photos app. So you can see it's not like a table view because there's like multiple cells per row and there's like columns as well. And then similarly in like Netflix and Spotify, you can see that there are different sections and these scroll horizontally with kind of like square cells or like rectangular cells. So how do we implement this? So we have some similarities. So like a UI table view, you have to implement something called a UI collection view data source. And the two required functions are number of items in section and cell for item at. So can anyone like make a guess as to like what these do, or like maybe do they remind you of something similar in UI table views? Anyone want to raise their hand? Just say anything that you notice that's similar. Yeah.
Well, like the cell for item at is kind of similar to the cell for row at.
Yeah, exactly. So cell for item at is basically the same thing as cell for row at, and then similarly for number of items in section, it's the same thing as the table view number of rows in section. So basically an item for UI collection view is the same thing as a row for UI table view, with the exception of some like similarities, or something that's slightly different is like index path.row isn't available in UI collection views, but instead it's called index path.item. So similarly, like item, row, pretty interchangeable. Just remember that item goes with collection view and row goes with table view. Does anyone have any questions about that? Okay, cool. Another thing, let's go through some like differences. So UI collection views can scroll in both directions, vertical and horizontal. So table views you can only scroll up and down, but in collection views you can scroll left and right as well. You can also adjust the width and height of each cell, whereas you can only adjust like the height for row at for a table view cell. And then if you think about it, since collection views can do vertical and horizontal scrolling, and you can change the size of the cells, you can actually make basically a UI table view with a UI collection view, but you can't make a collection view with a table view. Okay. And then another thing that you have to implement, because UI collection views have some more like flexibility to them, such as like the scrolling direction, you need to also create something called a UI collection view flow layout and then assign it to your collection view. So what this does is it basically specifies how your collection view items flow from like one row or column to the next. So some properties that you have to set, or that you can set, are the scroll direction. So do you want the collection view to scroll vertically or horizontally? What kind of spacing you want between two items, which is that like padding, the size of like both the width and height of each cell, and then the line spacing, which is like the space between lines of your collection view. Does anyone have any questions about that? All right, cool. So today we're going to do a fun demo. Basically, we're going to make a mock Photos app with our buddies Bill and Barack. So here's like a quick video showing what we're going to do. So there's basically alternating video photos, and if you tap on one, it'll basically remove it from like the collection view. And there's a nice header. And you can refresh, and that's about it. But the refreshing doesn't do anything. Yeah. All right, so to like follow along with this demo, I posted on Piazza the starter code, and as always, if you have like questions, like debugging questions, I think is left hand. Questions for me are right hand. All right. So if we open up the project on Xcode, we can see that I've already set up like the window for you in app delegate. I've removed the main.storyboard and I've edited the info.plist so that you don't have to, or like I removed the main storyboard file base name. So now we have this thing called just view controller. Right now it has a collection view, but we haven't created it yet. And then we have specified our different reuse identifiers that we're going to be using. So just like in table views, we have to assign a cell reuse identifier. And then for the padding and the header height, we've just set up some constants in our code so that we know like the specific size. So first, oh, and then also in our assets, I've already included Barack and Bill Gates as images so that we can access them later in our collection view. So first, let's start off by creating our collection view. So first, we need to set up our UI collection view flow layout because that's going to be what's going to control like how our collection view is implemented. So let's start by doing let layout equals UI collection view flow layout. And so you can just create a new layout instance like that. And now we can set up kind of all of the properties. So if you remember, we can actually set the scroll direction. So in this case, since it's like the Photos app, we want it to be vertical. So we can do layout.scroll direction. And then it's an enum, so we can just set it to be vertical. Yeah. And then since it's like up and down, and then we can also set now our inter-item spacing and our line spacing, which is just saying how much spacing do we want between each cell, and then how do we want the spacing to be between lines like or rows in our collection view. So we can do layout.minimum inter-item spacing, and we can set that to padding. And then we can also do layout.minimum line spacing and set that to padding as well. So basically we just want like the even padding between like the edges between each cell or between cells and then between like rows. So now that we've done that, we can now start creating our collection view. So we have this variable called collection view of type UICollectionView up here, and we're going to do collection view equals UICollectionView, and then we open the parentheses, and you can see that there's a couple of different constructors, and the one that you should use is this one because you specify the layout of your collection view. For frame, since we're using constraints, we can just set it to be 0 because the constraints will later dictate like the size. And then the layout that we're going to use is actually the layout we created, which is just called layout. Then, like always, we have to do collection view.translates auto resizing mask into constraints is false. And then let's set the background color. So you can set the background color property, and we can make it white. All right, so now that I have this, what do you think will happen when I run this code? Does anyone notice anything wrong? Yeah.
You have to add it to your subview.
Yeah, good. So you have to add it to your subview. So a lot of times you might forget, just out of like habit, that you just forget to call like view.add_subview, and then your app will crash. So double check anytime you like your app will crash or anything that you've actually added it to your subview. Yes.
I thought you said that like so when we set the scroll direction, I thought that you said that a collection view can scroll both vertically and horizontally. So does this just mean it's capable of doing either, but you have to specify which one?
Yeah, exactly. So you just have to specify which one. So this way it's vertical, not horizontal. Yeah, great question. Does anyone notice anything else? Will this collection view show up on the screen? Here's a hint. I have this function called setUpConstraints. that I've written for you. And it's going to basically set the leading, trailing, top, bottom to the leading, trailing, top, bottom of the view. Does anyone notice anything that I'm not doing? Yeah. Yeah, great. So I didn't call it. So that's another common mistake, is basically you've created your view, you've worked so hard to like make it look beautiful, and then you forget to set the constraints. So that's another thing that you need to watch out for. So now if we run this, basically we're just going to have an empty collection view. So we'll just have basically like a blank screen with the title at the top. Once it runs. All right, yeah. So basically we have nothing in our collection view because we actually haven't set our data source to have anything in it. So in our case, we're going to use model view controller. So right now this is our view in our view controller, but we need to set up our model. So we want to model Barack Obama and Bill Gates using like a person class. So we're going to make a new Swift class, and we're just going to call it like person once this works. So just create, I did Command N, and then you click Swift file, and then we can call it person, and then click create. So now that we have this, we also have to import UIKit because we want to store actually the image associated with each person. So if we do class person, we can have var profile image of type UI image, and then we can just create a custom initializer. And what we're actually going to do is take in a string for like image name. And we're going to do profile image is equal to UI image. So we can actually create the UI image in here. So we can go to this UI image named, and then we can set it to be image name. And since this returns an optional, we actually have to make this optional as well. So basically when we create a person, we're just going to pass in the string that represents the image name. So in our case, there's two images. One is called Bill Gates and one is called Barack. And so we can create those people in our view controller. So once everyone has that, let's create some people in our view.did load. So here, so we want, just like in our table view, we're going to have like an array. So let's call it people array of type person. And then in our view.did load, we can create our people. So let's create Obama. And the image name is Barack in our case. And then we can make Bill Gates. And so once we've created Barack and Bill, we can set our people array to be, let's just like, I think it's Barack, 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 and then Bill, 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 and then I'm just gonna copy and paste this like a couple of times so that we get like the full effect. Okay, so once we have this, now we can actually set up attaching our model to display from our view controller. So now we can do collection view dot data source equals self, and then collection view dot delegate equals self, because we're saying this view controller is going to actually dictate like how the data is going to be displayed. But it's saying right here cannot assign value of type view controller to type UI collection view data source. and delegate. And so what we need to do is, much like the table view lecture, we're going to implement those methods. And we're going to do them in an extension just to like section off our code. So we can do extension view controller of type UI collection view data source. And then we can also make another one for UI collection view delegate. And so just like the table view, there are two required methods, which I showed in the slides earlier. So this will get mad because it's saying the view controller does not conform to the protocol, so the functions that we specified that are in UI collection view data source are not implemented. So we can click fix and it'll provide these two functions. So one of them is number of items in section and one of them is cell for item at. And so here we're going to want to return the actual number of people we have displayed, right? So does anyone know or want to give a guess of like what we should be returning here? Yeah. Yeah, great. So we would do return people array.count. And here we actually have not created our collection view cell yet. So let's do that now. So basically this is saying like what kind of UI collection view cell should go at which item. So now we need to create a UI collection view cell. So I did Command N. We can select a Cocoa Touch class, and it's going to be subclassing UI collection view cell. And we can call it person collection view cell because we're basically just displaying an image of a person. So if you click next, click create. So now we have this, and now we're going to want to set up like all of our views or like inside of this cell. So basically all we want is an image, right? So if you go to Piazza, I think, there should be this code. So copy and paste this, and then we're going to create an init. So we're going to use this init frame rect. We're first going to do super.init with the same frame. And then we can set up and then we can paste all this stuff. So currently photo image view is not defined. So what we need to do, just like our view controllers, is just make a photo image view of type UI image view. So once we've done that, you might get like this error, just click fix. You don't need to worry about like what that does for now. Okay, so basically what this does is it creates a UI image view, translates auto resizing mask into constraints to false, and then you can add this subview to the content view, and then we set up our constraints here. Optionally, you can make a helper function that's called setup constraints, and then you can copy and paste this code in just to like keep it consistent with the rest of like the view controller code. So now that we have this, we also need to be able to basically set up a cell based on what kind of person we want to set it up with. So for example, if Bill, like the image of Bill, we want to associate that with this cell, we would have to somehow set the image or the image view to show up like, or to have Bill's image show up. So we can also make a function called configure, and we're going to configure it for a person of type person. And so here we're going to do all of our setting up. So we know that the photo image view exists, and we want to set the image property of that to be corresponding to the person's image. So this is how we would set that up. So basically, based on the person's profile image, we want to set this cell's photo image view image to be that. Does anyone have any questions about the collection view cell? Yeah.
I just was wondering, like, is the for keyword and like when you're defining configure,
Mm-hmm.
like is that necessary? Like, it seems like you're just referring to the person, so why do you need the for?
Yeah, good question. So the question was, why do you need this for? You really don't need it, but because Swift supports it, it basically is like a Swiftier way of writing functions because it reads more like a sentence. So you can also do configure person, but I just personally think like you're configuring it for a person, so like why not include the for keyword as well? Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, cool. So now that we've set up our cells, we can actually go back to our view controller. And so here, this is basically where we would want to like dequeue and reuse our cells. So just like UI table views, UI collection views also do the same dequeuing process. So what we would do here is we're going to do let cell equals collection view dot dequeue reusable cell with reuse identifier, and then we would want to reuse our photo cell, and then we're going to do it at the same index path, and we know that it's going to be of type person collection view cell. And then now that we have this cell, we can also get the person corresponding with this index path. So let person equals person array, or people array. And then it's going to be, we're accessing the person at this index. So we want to access the index of the person in the person array, and it's going to be, instead of index path.row, it's going to be index path.item because this is a collection view. And then we can do cell.configure. And then we can set this up so that the person's image shows up. So we can configure it for the person. And then we can return the cell. So basically, whenever we're reusing this cell, we're going to dequeue it. When it goes off screen, we're going to set it up with the new person that's appearing on screen so that it shows up at the right index and the image is correct. So we're dequeuing our cells with this reuse identifier, but we actually haven't registered our collection view to associate with this photo cell reuse identifier. So exactly like the UI table views, we need to actually register this identifier so that it knows when this type of cell is dequeued. It can remember and identify that. So how we do that is just like in table views, collection view.register, and we're going to register the photos or person collection view cell .self with the photo cell reuse identifier. So that's basically saying anytime I have a cell, it's going to be, or a person collection view cell, it's going to be associated with the photo cell. Does anyone have any questions about that? Okay, cool. So now that we actually have this, we can try running it. So if we run, which is Command R, we can now see that we have a collection view with some bills and baraks. But if you remember from the demo, we actually had like 3 people in a row and you could like scroll. This is because we actually haven't specified some information to the UI collection view flow layout. And so what we have to do is actually conform our view controller to another protocol called UI collection view delegate flow layout. So what we do for this is basically we can make another extension. And here we can implement some methods that'll actually specify the size of the cell that we want, right? Because Kind of like in UITableViews, you can specify the row size by like returning a number here. This is where we would basically specify like the size of the elements. So there's a function called size for item at. So if you start typing size for item at, it should give you this function. Just click enter. And basically we want to have 3 images that take up like the equal width on the screen, and we want that padding in between. So we kind of have to do some math here. So if we want, like, we have like 4 pieces of padding, right? So there's 2 on the sides and then 2 in the middle. So we're gonna have to do, we have to set the, okay, so the collection view has a width, and we can access that by doing collectionView.frame.width. And then we want to subtract out 4 times the padding, right? Because that's going to take care of the 4 padding instances that we have between our 3 cells. And then after that, we can divide by 3 to get the actual width that we want for each cell. So basically what this is saying is we're taking out the padding and we're dividing the width of the screen by 3 to get the length of the cell that we want. And then since we want the images to be square, we can, basically this length is going to be the width and the height. So it's specifying that we want to return a CG size here. So we're going to return CG size with width and height. And so both arguments here are going to be length. Okay, so now that we've specified this size, we can now run it again. And then hopefully we'll have our lovely like 3 in a row. Yeah, so now we have our 3 in a row because we specified there's padding here, there's padding here, there's padding here, and there's padding on the end. And then you can like scroll like that. Okay, does anyone have any questions about how that works? All right, cool. So now the next thing we want to implement is basically clicking on one of these. So like clicking on Bill or like Obama is going to make them like remove, and then we're going to reload so that everything like shifts according to the array. And so where we're going to implement that is just like in UITableViews delegate, there's a function in UICollectionView delegate that's did select item at. So if you type in did select item at, you can see that there's like a, you can autocomplete, press enter. And so now what we want to do when you select this item is we want to remove it. So how do we access, or how do we get like the item in the people array that corresponds with this collection view cell? Does anyone have any ideas? Anyone? Just want to guess? I'll give you a hint. It's using index path. Yeah.
I was going to say, isn't index path dot item an integer, so it'd be like that. Maybe that -1.
Yeah. No. You were right the first time. So the way we would access the person corresponding to it is if we go into people array and then we could do index path dot item. So we can assign this to a variable or a let constant. So we can get the person, or since we're removing, what we can actually do is people array dot remove, and then it says at int, so we can remove it at actually index path dot item because that's the one that's corresponding with that person. So if you wanted a way to access the person, you would do people array index path dot item. But if you just need to know what index it's at, it would be just index path dot item. And so once the people array is updated, we want to refresh the view to update to reflect that, so that like the images move around based on who I clicked on. Does anyone have any guess for like what we should do here to like reload the collection view? There's like an exact function in table. Yeah. Yeah, awesome. So you would actually do collectionView.reload data. And so now that the model has updated, so our people array has been updated, we want our controller to update the view. So that's basically what this is doing. So now if we run it, we have our photos, and then let's click on one of these guys, and then we can see that it's being updated. And slowly, you'll like, if you click enough, we can just remove everyone. Does anyone have any questions about, yeah?
So in this case, is the only like delegate you actually like 100% need to implement in order for it to work is like the delegate for the UI collection view data source. Is that the other one you need to?
Yeah, good question. So is the only protocol you need to implement for collection views the data source? Yeah. So similar to UI table views, you just need to specify like how the data is being, like where data is, and like how you would display the data, because otherwise like it doesn't know what's going to be displayed. Yeah, so these two functions, number of items in section and cell for item at, must be implemented if you want your collection view to have stuff show up. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, cool. So next, we're supposed to have like a header at the top here that just says like header. And how we can do that is make something called a supplementary view. And so we're going to start by making our view. So if you click Command N and then do Cocoa Touch class. So this is just going to be a subclass of UI view. And so we can call it header view. Click Next. Click Create. So basically, you can delete all this commented out stuff. And then we're going to create our view. So actually, I lied, it's not a UI view, it's a UI collection reusable view, because headers can be reusable too. So now we can do our init method. Or it should be, oh, there we go. So we can have our init method. So similar to our collection view cell, it's going to be super.init with the frame. And then we just want like a label in here. So, oh, you also have to fix this. So let's make a label, and let's call it just label of type UI label. And then inside this init, we're going to initialize it and then set up the constraints. So we can have a func called setup constraints here, and call it at the end of our init. So if you go back to Piazza, there should be some code that you can copy and paste. So there's this label equals UI label, blah, blah, blah. Oh, I guess I can delete this, but basically just paste it over and it'll basically set up the label for you. The text is just going to say header. We've made the font, UI font like size 20, and it's bold, and we've added it to the subview. And notice here we don't do content view because this is a view and not a cell. So, and the reason why we don't do view.add subview is because this itself is the view. So it's kind of like calling self.add subview. And then we can set up the constraints. And then going back to Piazza, basically you can copy and paste this middle part. And what it's going to do is just center it horizontally. Nope, vertically. And then set the leading anchor equal to the view's leading anchor. So it's just all the way on the left. Okay, so once we have this, we can actually now register this header view as part of our collection view cell. So if we go back to our view controller, similar to how we registered our person collection view cell, we can register supplementary views. So a supplementary view is like a header or something similar. So we can do collection view dot register, and then you can see instead of cell class, which is what we used for the person collection view cell, we can register the view class, and then basically what you want to do is it's basically the same thing. So we want to register the header view dot self for supplementary view of kind, and so this is a header. So the type of this is actually going to be UI collection element kind section header. That should work. Oh, it got renamed. Oh, just click fix. It's been renamed in Swift 4.2, I guess. And then the reuse identifier is going to be our header reuse identifier. So we want this header to be reused in a different way than our cell would. Otherwise, we would have like header, 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 header like all over our photos. And that wouldn't be good. So we're going to specify header reuse identifier. And so once we've registered that, now we have to actually implement some different methods so that we know where, like how this header is going to show up in our collection view, and like setting it up. So we need to now implement some new functions. So one of them is in UICollectionView data source, because similar to how we dequeue collection view cells, we also if our like collection view is super long and we had multiple headers in different places, we would actually be dequeuing our header view as well. So this function is going to be view for supplementary item. So you can't actually see it, but this is the function that you want. Just press enter. So you can see it's called view for supplementary element of kind at index path. And this returns a UI collection reusable view, which is the type of the header view that we made. So here we can basically dequeue it. So let header view equals collection view dot dequeue, and so we use dequeue reusable cell in the function above because we were dequeuing a collection view cell, but here we're dequeuing a view. So of kind with reuse identifier, header reuse identifier. Oh, actually, this kind should be of the same UI collection view dot element kind section header. And then the index path is the index path. And then we're going to cast it because we know we've registered this header as header view. And then since it's been dequeued, we don't really have to do any sort of like setting up because we just want it to be always header. So we can just return it. Does anyone have any questions about how that's set up? Okay, so now that we've set that up, we can specify the size of this header, because just like the collection view cells, we haven't actually specified like the width and height of our header. So now in our UI collection view delegate flow layout, we have to implement something similar. So it's going to be called reference size for header in section. So this is basically saying since we registered it as a UI collection view dot element kind section header, this function is going to be called to determine what size the header should be. So here we can just say we have a constant up here that just specifies how tall the header should be. So we can just return a CG size with a width and height. And the width is going to be, it's going to take up the whole width of the collection view. So collectionView.frame.width. And then the height is going to be our header height. Okay, so now we've specified the size of it, how it's going to be shown up, and how it can be dequeued on screen. So we can try running this now. So now we can see we've got this snazzy header in the top left. And then similar to before, we've got this scrolling collection view. You can click on it, stuff gets deleted. Does anyone have any questions about headers? All right, cool. So the last feature that we need to implement is basically we want like a little refresh thingy to show up and refresh for a couple of seconds and then dismiss. So how we can implement that is using something called a UI refresh control. So if we go all the way to the top, we can declare it with our UI elements. So here we can do var refresh control is of type UI refresh control. And then similarly in our viewDid load, just like all of our other elements, we can create it. So let's create it here. So refresh control is of type, we can create a UI refresh control. And then kind of like how a button is triggered, you want to register a function that will be called when you pull to refresh. So let's make a function called pulled to refresh. And we can add a target to this refresh control. So refresh control.add target. The target is self. The action is going to be a selector. And the function name is called pulled to refresh. And we basically want it to be called anytime, instead of touch up inside or anything, the event is actually called value change. So it's basically anytime you've dragged it, causing it to spin, we want this function to be called. And then, so this says argument of selector refers to something not exposed to Objective-C. Just click fix, so we get that Object-C keyword in front. And so now how do we actually attach this refresh control to our collection view? The way we can do that is by doing collectionView.refresh control is equal to refresh control. So you can actually associate, just like in table views, you can actually do the same thing. So if you want to pull to refresh to fetch the latest data, if it's connected to the internet or something, this is basically how you do it in a collection view and a table view. And once you've done that, now we can actually see stuff happen. And we haven't implemented this function yet, but we can basically see what happens. So we've got this thing, and it'll just spin forever because we haven't told it to stop. So basically, what we want it to do, if you remember from the demo, we just want it to spin for 1 or 2 seconds, and then dismiss and stop. And we can pretend that maybe it's fetching the latest photos from the internet. So how we can do that is we can use this thing called dispatch queue. So what this basically does is we can say dispatch queue.main, and then we'll say async after. And so you don't really need to worry about what this does exactly, but we're just going to say after a certain amount of time, we want this to be executed. So if you double click on execute, this is actually a function block. It's called a closure. We're going to learn more about what closures do in the coming weeks. But basically it's saying after some sort of deadline, we want the stuff between these 2 curly brackets to be run. So the deadline is going to be in 2 seconds, and how we do that is .now. So it's saying starting now plus 2 seconds is basically in 2 seconds. So after 2 seconds, we want our refresh control to stop. So how we do that is self.refreshControl.endRefreshing. And so what this is saying is after 2 seconds, we want the refresh control to stop. And then like the collection view will just go back to how it was before. And so if we run this, so we've got our same collection view, and if we pull to refresh, it'll run for 2 seconds and then go back to normal. So you, later we'll learn why we might need this. So if like your internet is really slow or something like that and it's taking forever, at least your user will know like something is happening, like you're connecting to the internet, stuff like that. Does anyone have any questions about that? Okay, cool. So that's it for a demo. So a couple more reminders. So the drop deadline is Monday, April 8th. So we don't have class next week because of spring break. Have a great spring break. But just so you know, if you are interested, the drop deadline is like on that Monday when we have class at midnight. So just a heads up about that. And then we have Project 5, which is due the Sunday after we get back from break. So you'll have a week to do that. And yeah, if you have any questions, let us know. Thanks.
Oh wait, is it?
Wait, Sunday, oh, April 14th. I don't know time. Sorry about that. Alright, that's it.